Okay, so if you're just joining us and you haven't seen before, what we're roasting right now is Sumatra. And this is right towards the end of the roast, but I wanted you to catch it. We're going to roast another batch of Sumatra here in just a minute. But Sumatra is the only coffee that we roast really dark. And when I mean really dark, I mean just like barely into second crack. We're going to take this bean temperature to about 455 degrees, and then we're going to cut it off. That's just into second crack, and it's going to happen here pretty quickly. So you can see that the air is flowing across the beans. It's creating a fluid bed. Looks like a fountain effect. But I'm going to put you down because I don't want these beans to burn. You can see how we cooled them. Okay, so we want to get these beans as cool as possible, as quickly as possible. What you can see right here, what we've done is we've diverted the exhaust from the overhead exhaust vent to the cooling tray. And what it's doing is it's pulling fresh, cool, room temperature air across the beans. We're cooling these beans from 455 degrees down to room temperature as quickly as possible. And they're starting to cool down very nicely, very quickly. One of the things you can notice here is you can see the skin. See the beans up close. Notice how they've cracked. You can see little minute pieces of coffee cracking. You can see a nice smooth skin, but you don't see a dark, black, oily skin. We don't allow our Sumatra to get that dark. And of course, I don't know exactly how you see it online, but one of the things that's really fun, I get to control the entire process right here with a couple of knobs. Up to 10,000 watts of electricity, and I have a bean loft. This is a fan that blows air across the heating coils. So let me show you. When I turn on the heating element, which gives it 7,000 watts of electricity, on the inside here you'll see all the way at the bottom of this it'll turn really bright red. You can see those heating coils really start to heat up. It's like looking down the center of a heat gun or a really hot hairdryer. We're going to allow this to warm up to about 400 degrees, and we're going to start our next batch. I'm going to prepare the next batch of green beans. So if you haven't seen these green beans before, this is the Sumatra green bean. It's quite a gnarly looking bean, lots of different color, texture on the bean itself. We're going to go ahead and stabilize the air temperature around 420 degrees on the roaster itself. And we'll start roasting the bean until about 455 degrees. And if you stay with us, we'll go ahead and walk you through the whole process. It's pretty dusty. So Sumatra for us is a really dusty, a lot of debris is on that bean right out of the bag. I don't know if they just don't wash it well or should they leave a lot of debris in the bag, but you can see all of this is chaff. As the bean dries during the roasting process, the bean has a small, thin skin on the outside of the bean. That's called chaff. That chaff is going to be shed as the bean roasts. And that chaff is going to be pulled into the exhaust system and filtered out into a filter down here underneath that iPad. And there's a little basket that it filters all out, and then the exhaust can go outside clean. So right now you can see, I'll pull this back a little bit. The beans, they're rotating. There's hot air being pushed up underneath the beans across the heating coil. And I can control that heating coil right here with watts. I can crank this up to 7 or 10,000 watts. And right now I'm at 7,000 watts of electricity. My bean loft, as you see here, this is a fan control. So I can increase watts and increase fan, and it'll allow more heat to flow across those beans. And vice versa, I can increase or decrease the fan. So as a result, right now, my air temperature is 415-16 degrees coming across the beans. But my beans, they're actually 273 degrees right now. We're going to allow this temperature to get up to be approximately 455 degrees. Sumatra allows us to go into second crack without losing a lot of flavor profile. Sumatra is a bean that's very hard, it's very durable, it's a very rugged bean. And if you saw the green beans when we first started, they're really gnarly. They have a lot of characteristics to it. It provides a real woody, earthy profile that we use when roasted to second crack, 455 degrees. It really draws that flavor profile out and produces a really nicely roasted cup of coffee. We use that Sumatra in our Remedy blend, and we use 20% Sumatra in that blend to give it just a hint of darkness to balance out that cup. So as these beans are drying right now, they're heating. This is called the drying stage. All the way up until about 390 degrees, we're going through a drying stage, and then we're going to start our first crack. Sumatra cracks first around 395 to 400. And then it's going to go into second crack about 450 degrees. And what this is the bean dries to the extent that it cracks. It pops open like a piece of popcorn. Once it hits second crack in this temperature, the bean gets to be about 455 degrees. We're going to put it into the cooling tray and pull fresh, cool air across it, cooling those beans down to room temperature as quickly as possible. But I'm going to go ahead and set you down here for just a minute. You always have to have a good cup of coffee. This is about my 10th cup of coffee, so I created a little dessert coffee, a little cream. Yes, even I like cream sometimes. I love it, actually. I only allow that a treat once or twice a day. So where we are right now is this Sumatra. The air temperature is about 445 degrees. The temperature of the bean right now is at 410 degrees, and we're just starting or getting into first crack. So let me show you what that's about. So you can see the air temperature coming across the bean is 440 degrees, but the bean is only 412 degrees. The bean is cracking and going through its first crack process. We're going to allow this bean to get all the way into second crack at 455 degrees. Sumatra is the only bean we allow it to get that dark. What you can see right now is that you have these particles, the skin of the beans floating off of the coffee and up through the exhaust. That's called chaff. As the bean cracks and it dries, the chaff comes off and goes up through the exhaust system. And we have a filter through the exhaust system that catches all the chaff, bars, etc. and allow this to get to 455, and then we're going to dump the beans into the cooling tray, diverting the exhaust into the cooling tray, and try to cool those beans down as quickly as possible. But we probably have another minute or two before we get to that part. So I'm going to go ahead and put you down and we can kind of observe this from afar. The office here is the bake shop. We have a little bagging operation over here. You can see all the cupcake cabinets. They tempt me every day, of course. And then our bagging table, a little coffee and cream over there. And we do all of our weighing and our scales and our grinding here. And of course I have a great view out the window, Stevens County Courthouse, and my own little piece of Duncan. So it's pretty fun. And there you are. Awesome. Alright, we're at 448 degrees. We're going to go ahead and allow this to get a cooling tray. And with the cooling tray now, the beans are cooling rapidly. You should be able to get the skin of the beans. You can see how they've cracked in the middle. Small little finite cracks throughout the bean. So what I'm doing right now is preparing the next batch. We just finished roasting the Sumatra. And it looks like we're going to go ahead and roast 2 batches of Kenya and 1 batch of decaf, and then we'll be done for the day. So we have about another 45 minutes of roasting left. We have 9 pounds of Kenya that we need to roast. So we're going to do 2 batches of 5.5 pounds. We have a chat here on the YouTube video, so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and I'd be happy to answer them. I'm going to get the Kenya ready. I'll be right back. Yeah, and I don't allow the other beans to get that far. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of that. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty sad. Alright, so we're going to do 2 batches of Kenya today. I'm going to show you these green beans as we get started. Kenya is a really unique profiled coffee. Has a lot of molasses, tomato sauce, a lot of unique East African characteristics to the coffee. And there's really very unique only to Kenya. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and heat our air temperature up to about 440 degrees, and then we're going to roast this coffee up to about 420 degrees over a 10 to 11 minute period. So let me show you how that's done. We've started the roasting process. Now let me show you. Here today we're using the Coffee Crafters Artisan 6M air roaster. This particular roaster is what we call a fluid bed hot air roaster. I have the ability to control the amount of power that gets put to the heating elements up to 10,000 watts of electricity. And right now we're going to start this roasting process out at about 7,000 watts. I have a beam loft control, which this is a fan control that controls a fan that blows across our heating elements. And as a result, you can see it gives the beam loft. The fan blows the heat across the heating elements, circling these beans, cycling them through basis. And you can see here, I have a bean temperature probe. The temperature of these beans right now are about 781, 82 degrees. And we're going to allow these beans to get up to about 420 degrees today. As the beans start roasting here, the first stage is what we call the yellowing stage, or the drying stage. The beans lose their moisture as they heat up, and what we're trying to do is gradually draw that moisture out of the bean and dry the bean. And as the bean dries, it loses its moisture. The bean is lighter, and so it gains more loft, and I have to continue to adjust that loft to ensure that we don't blow beans out of this basket. As the drying stage completes, we're going to get to this bean temperature of about 390 degrees. Around 390 degrees, that bean temperature is going to allow the bean to crack. And coffee beans can go through 2 crack stages, a first crack and a second crack. And here at Viridian Coffee, we do not allow very many coffees to get to second crack because they just taste burnt and too dark. And I know some people are looking for that taste profile, but that's not what we're going for here. We want you to be able to taste the unique characteristics of that coffee bean. And so as a result, this particular bean, we're going to roast it medium just past first crack. And that's going to be about 420 degrees. Once the bean finishes roasting, we're going to dump it into the cooling tray here. And you get to see that in a minute. This is some Sumatra from the previous batch that we're getting ready to put in a bucket so we can sort and bag. Let me give you a view of our shop. This is our weighing table. I do a lot of our sorting and processing here. We have a grinder. And of course we're co-located with the bake shop. And I don't know if you have ever been in a coffee shop, bake shop, but let me tell you, it's an amazing combination. It's probably not great for my health. So you can see that here. We have a beautiful bake shop, Janice Skinner Special Days Bakery. And we have our roasting operation over here in the corner. It's the Artisan 6M roaster. And out my window, I have a beautiful view of the Duncan Stevens County Courthouse. Hard to see, it's a little bright outside today. Let's go ahead and put you up here and we'll get those beans moved over. We have 2 more batches to roast after this, 1 more Kenya and 1 batch of decaf, and then we'll be done roasting today and then we'll start bagging. We'll finish some bagging today, but most of it will all be finished tomorrow. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the side chat bar here on the YouTube channel. My coffee cup's empty. Time for a refill. So today, right now, I'm treating myself to a little bit of cream and sugar. It's my dessert coffee. It's been a long day. I'm almost done roasting. I got my Cliff Bar to hold me over. You know, it's dinner time soon. So right now, this is a very fun part. The coffee is about 389, 390 degrees. We're starting first crack right here. The air temperature coming across the bean is about 420 to 430 degrees, and the bean temperature is going to be 390 to 315 degrees all the way through first crack. And as you can see, the skin, the chaff is really coming off the bean now, and it's floating up through the exhaust system. Okay, this first crack, you can hear it, it's popping like popcorn. This particular bean, the Kenya, has a lot of very bright molasses, tomato sauce type of notes in it. None of these coffees are flavored. That's just a natural characteristic of the bean in the flavor profile from that country and region. This bean we're going to roast all the way through first crack. And right as first crack ends, around 320 degrees, we're going to pull this bean off. But a lot of times folks are not aware that roasting coffee is not like baking a cake. I don't have a recipe that I can just throw it in the oven and then set it to 325 degrees and pull it out in 15 minutes. The coffee tells me when it's done. The humidity in the air, the moisture in the bean, the ambient air temperature all affects how fast or how slow that coffee will roast. And so what I'm listening for is that first crack. As it finishes, the coffee is telling me that it's ready to be pulled off, regardless of whatever the temperature is on the bean. So I'm really trying to pay attention to when that coffee is done. And it's hard to see through the webcam here, but the bean itself has some characteristics on the skin. And as a roaster, I'm always trying to pay attention to what the bean actually looks like, because that's another sign of when that bean is actually finished roasting. So we are about done with this particular batch. And so I'm going to go ahead and set you aside, and you can watch this go through the cooling process. We're going to turn off the heat, pull the beans off, pour them into the cooling tray. So right here you can see we've diverted the exhaust fan down to the cooling tray. And through the cooling tray, this allows us to pull cool ambient temperature air across the beans to cool those beans down to air temperature as quickly as possible. So what we'll do here is we just stir the beans around, allowing new beans to come to the surface and begin to cool. So you can see from 415, 420 degrees down to room temperature pretty quickly. Look at is to see if you can notice the skin of the beans. Look at how some of these particular beans, they look like they have veins or wrinkles in the skin. Here. It has a very sweet, savory smell. Most of the other coffees do not have that kind of smell to the bean itself. But Kenya, the East African coffee beans, are very unique flavor profile. show you these green coffee beans if you haven't seen them before. The green coffee beans have a lot of moisture and weight to them. They're very dense and very heavy, and they're pretty small. Much smaller than most people expect. We're going to heat the roaster up to 420 degrees. Go ahead and start the roasting process. This is the last batch of Kenya. We'll do one batch of decaf after this and then we'll be done. Let me show you how the beans are being roasted right now. This particular roaster is the Coffee Crafters Artisan 6M fluid bed hot air roaster. It works very much like a popcorn popping machine. Here I can control the air temperature using power being applied to the heating elements. I can apply up to 10,000 watts of electricity, and I can control the air temperature through my bean loft, or my airflow through my bean loft. You can see the hot air being pushed across the beans creates a rotating fluid bed of coffee beans. That air temperature right now, as you can see, is about 407 degrees. The bean temperature is about 225 degrees. And we're going to heat these beans up to 415 to 420 degrees. This is a Kenya roast. A Kenya bean that we're going to roast medium. Right now the bean is going through what we call a drying or a yellowing stage. During this time the bean is losing its moisture and it starts to yellow all the way through and into first crack. After the yellowing stage and the drying stage is complete, it's going to start its browning stage. As it goes through a light brown, a medium brown, and then a dark brown, all the way into a much darker stage. But here we're only going to allow this coffee to get to 420 degrees. We want a good medium. Bean is completed. We're going to put it over here in the cooling tray. As you can see, these beans have just finished cooling. And then we'll put them in some buckets and prepare to start bagging this coffee. As you can see, the coffee loses weight as it dries, and so the air pushes those coffee beans up higher and higher, and we have to just keep adjusting the airflow. If you haven't seen our shop before, the weighing station, and this is the bake shop. Special Days Bake allows us to. We have some bagging operations going on, but if you haven't been around cupcakes and coffee before, let me tell you, it's dangerous. It's a struggle every day trying to stay away from those cupcakes. On the drying stage for the next few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and put you down until we're ready to show you first crack. roast coffee without drinking a good cup of coffee. Okay, so this is where the Kenya is going to start. Its first crack. You can see the temperature here is about 395 degrees. And the Kenya is going to micro cracks at first, and it's going to pick up quite a lot. But you can see there's a lot of chaff, a lot of skin coming off the bean right now. There it is. You can hear the crack. And this, the bean is actually split, all of its moisture. You can see right now the temperature of the ignition. And I'll show you the cooling process as soon as the first crack is complete. Feel the heat. Take the beans off. Pour in the cooling tray. So we redirected all of the upper exhaust down to the cooling tray, and the cooling tray is now sucking cool ambient air across the beans, attempting to drop the bean temperature as quickly as possible. We want the beans to cool as fast as they can. We do not want them to keep cooking while they're here in the tray. And they're even to a point already that I can touch them. You can tell the beans are cooling down very, very fast, very rapidly. So what I wanted to show you was the skin, the texture of the beans. If you can see, the outside of the bean has a texture. Some beans are really very smooth, some have a little bit of wrinkle in them, some have a little bit of veins. There's a particular texture we're always looking for when it comes to each particular coffee, and it's just a visual marker and indicator of how far along the bean is. Sometimes I refer to it as a raisin. The outside of the texture of the skin kind of looks like a raisin at different points of the roasting profile. This is always down at the bottom of the roasting chamber. As I apply heat, you can see the coils will begin to heat and they'll turn red. It's coils just like in a heat gun, in a hair dryer, etc. And that heat is drawn out with the fan underneath those coils that allows the air to be blown across it. And that's how we transfer the heat from the coils into the bean itself. So while these beans are cooling, we're going to start the next batch. I'm going to go ahead and put you up here. One more batch of coffee. If you're just joining us and you want to see how coffee is being roasted, this is your last opportunity to see it live. Of course, you can go back from the last hour or two and you can see several different batches of coffee. We've had a few minor internet issues, so there are a few glitches here and there, but we're trying to ensure that we have enough batches recorded and provided online so that you can really see how we roast coffee on Tuesdays. Let me get that decaf ready, and you're in for a real treat if this is the first time you've seen that, because the decaf, when it dries in the yellowing stage, it actually turns kind of red. It doesn't yellow, and that's because of the way the coffee is processed. This will be a really interesting roast, and it'll be great for you to see it. Okay, so this particular coffee, this is the Costa Rica Swiss water processed decaf. I don't know if you can see it, but the green bean here kind of looks a little bit gray. The decaf is processed with heat, water, and coffee only. It's the most natural, best way to process decaf coffee in the world. Okay, it looks like we had a little bit of an internet connection issue and we still have one now. So right now the internet looks good, so we're going to go ahead and go process this last batch of decaf, and I'd like for you to see that. This particular decaf is Swiss water processed decaf. If you heard me say that before, I apologize for repeating, but the internet's been giving us a hard time. This decaf is some of the best decaf coffee in the world. And the reason for that is because of how it's processed. It's processed with Swiss water in Switzerland, coffee and heat only. There's no chemicals added to this coffee, and it is 99.9% decaffeinated. It's one of the best tasting decafs that I have ever had, and this coffee has a very unique roasting process. And instead of going through the yellowing stage, it actually goes through a redding stage, and it's red as it dries. So this is very interesting, and I think you'll be interested to see it. So I'm going to heat the roaster up to 420 degrees and prepare it for the coffee. It looks like the internet is back. Sorry for the trouble. Again, we're roasting this Swiss water processed Costa Rican decaf. I'd like to go ahead and show you how it's doing. This coffee right here is at 288 degrees, and it's going to be roasted all the way up until about 425 degrees. And right now it's going through what we call the yellowing process or the drying process. This particular decaf, as it goes through the yellowing process, actually turns red where other coffees turn yellow. And what it's doing is it's losing its moisture right now. And as it loses its moisture, it becomes lighter and lighter. And I can control the heat and airflow through these dials down here on the dash. I can increase the heat up to 10,000 watts of electricity, and I can boost the bean loft by turning up the airflow, and all of that combined controls the temperature that flows across those beans. This particular roaster is the Coffee Crafters Artisan 6M, and it pulls hot air across the bottom of that roaster through the heating coils and up through the beans. And let me show you what the beans look like as they're roasting. This particular decaf has a real sweet smell, kind of a syrupy smell. And if you can tell, those coffee beans do not look yellow. They look kind of a reddish color. That's not really brown yet. Most of the other coffees during this stage are very yellow, bright, grassy, green yellow. The green starts to fade away, the yellow takes over, and then the browning starts to happen. But here with this decaf, it goes through a redding stage. And it's also going to hit its first crack period around 390 to 400 degrees. Up top here, we have the exhaust system that draws off the exhaust, as well as the chaff and any other debris that comes off the coffee beans. And it gets gets filtered down into a microfilter mesh bag there underneath that iPad. And at the end of this video, as we stop the exhaust fan, I'll show you what that chaff actually looks like. It's pretty fun. We're going to let this coffee roast, like I said, to about 420-25 degrees, and then we're going to put it in the cooling tray. And this cooling tray is going to pull cool ambient air across the beans to cool them. So while we're getting through this drying stage and just before first crack, I'm going to go ahead and put you down for a minute. Okay, this is the exciting part of the coffee. The coffee is entering first crack right now. If you listen to it, you can hear it snap, crackle, and pop just like you would popcorn. Current bean temperature is about 412 degrees. We're going to let this coffee go to about 420 to 425 degrees. And then we're going to put it through the cooling tray and cool it down to room temperature. So as we're approaching that stage, I'm going to go ahead and put you down for just a minute. doing right now is we're cooling the beans as quickly as possible by drawing fresh cool air over the beans by stopping up the exhaust system and redirecting it to the cooling tray. So let me show you how that works. So this is the exhaust system, and what we're doing is we're diverting the exhaust to pull air across the cooling tray, cooling these beans down as quickly as possible. It's our goal to get these beans down to room temperature, and you can tell they're already cooling quite nicely, very quickly. So as these beans cool, what I'd like to show you is the surface of these beans. You can pay attention to the skin and the texture of the beans. And we're always trying to pay attention to the right texture, the right temperature, so that we can get the best quality roast out of each coffee. So as soon as these beans finish cooling, what I'd like to do is show you some of the exhaust system in the chaff. This is really fun, but I need to shut the exhaust system down to show you because the chaff is a bunch of little micro pieces of coffee and skin, and if the exhaust is on, it could just blow everywhere, and that's not good business for anybody. I always look forward to the moment that we shut off the exhaust system. That thing has been running for like 5 hours now. It's just this ongoing droning sound. I'm very thankful to shut it off when it's done. I feel like I'm in a hull or an engine room of a submarine or something. Not that I've been in one of those, but I can imagine. When I was in Iraq, I had a housing unit right next to a generator. That wasn't any good either. Okay, so check this out. So this is chaff. This is the skin that comes off the coffee bean as it roasts. It's quite interesting. It's good for compost and I'm sure something else, I don't know, but we compost it and we throw it away and all that. But you can see here how thin and fine it is. And this is really cool. This is just a grease bag that's been retrofitted and sewn to fit our exhaust system so it catches all of that chaff. And you can see, if you didn't know, but coffee's pretty oily. And so the oil also comes through with that chaff and gets caught up here in the bag. And so the bag has to be cleaned each week. And of course the chaff cleared out, otherwise it would stop up. Well, we've really appreciated you joining us roasting today, if you're still online. We've had a great time. Tuesday roasting day is complete. We're going to now shut down operations, seal up our coffee, make sure we maintain that freshness, and then we're going to start bagging coffee and getting it ready to ship tomorrow. It'll be available at Baker Pharmacy, Brooks Meat Market. It's going to be at TT's Crepes on the 81 in Maine. And it's also going to be ready for you to pick up right here at Viridian Coffee and Special Days Bakery first thing Thursday morning. Saturday, we're going to be at all the farmers markets, both in Duncan and at Murphy's Farms, all weekend long. Let me correct that. Saturday, we're going to be at the Lawton Farmers Market, Murphy Farms in the morning and in the evening. Saturday, we'll be at the Duncan Farmers Market. Lord willing, we all survive and we don't have any issues with this weather. So I hope you have a blessed week. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.